If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos. So here we are, the moment that Season 9 has been building up to. The final showdown between the heroes and the villains. The final fight for Equestria's future. The ending of the end. Honestly, that's a horrible title for an episode. But anyway, we're finally here. The moment that they've been building up to for months. So was it worth the wait? It was better than Cutie Remark? Well, let's just start with things in the episode that worked. Rarity, for example, was a total badass. She takes a surprising amount of initiative here, which is pretty impressive considering she's not normally used to conflict or much of a fighter. From putting her hoof down on Discord to protecting Twilight from the villain attacks, to even facing off Chrysalis to protect Spike. And it also leads into something else that's pretty cool. This moment with Rarity protecting Spike, then Spike protecting Rarity, then seeing the two teaming up to power through Chrysalis, really shows how much the bond between the two has strengthened over the years. What started out as an irritating running gag ended up evolving into something really wholesome. Now the two fully acknowledge and respect each other as equals. Their relation is no longer driven by a cheap one-sided romance, now it's strengthened by a genuine friendship between the two. It takes an element from Dragon Dropped and expands upon it to show how far the two have come in terms of treating and supporting each other. And speaking of Spike, he was pretty good in this episode too. One thing that I've always loved about the show's later seasons is that they've really given a lot of appreciation to him. From a silly sidekick to a butt monkey to a growing boy to a supportive companion to finally earning his wings. This episode really helps to show how much he's progressed and how much he's matured over the last 9 years. Uniting nations, helping Twilight become the princess she was meant to be, sticking by her side through thick and thin, earning his status as Twilight's little brother, and finally becoming a representative for a much larger outside world. Some people may not realize it, but it's actually hard to forget how he's become one of the most important characters in the show. He's responsible for 2 alliances with Equestria, saved an entire kingdom from destruction twice, and in spite of his dragon heritage, he still remained loyal to his friends. After everything he's been through, it makes perfect sense for him to be given an honor as high as royal advisor. It's a really huge throwing the dog a bone moment for him, as he's finally fully acknowledged as Twilight's equal. For a long time, Spike was usually seen by a lot of fans as a side character or placed in a supporting role. But now in Season 9, with episodes like Twilight 7 and moments like this, the show is fully acknowledging that Spike is, and always has been, a main character. He has his own standout moments such as going up against Cozy Glow and the aforementioned team up with Rarity. It's a real treat to see him getting more involved in the action, especially since he's had moments of action before, like in the movie or when he faced off the rock monster in Meltdown. And seeing Spike willingly stand alone against a fully powered Chrysalis really displays how courageous he's grown. I'll admit that I was one of those people who didn't think too highly of Spike at first, but around Season 4, he really started to grow on me. A lot of Spike fans, including myself, has had his back for quite a long time, and it's really satisfying to see our loyalty to him be rewarded in the end. Seeing how far he's come and how much he's grown, it's a really good victory lap for Spike. Then you have the terrible trio. I know a lot of people aren't happy with how they were shoehorned in as the main villains over Grogar, but within the episode itself, they're not utilized in a bad way. They still have some really fun banter and chemistry, and now they get to present themselves as a combined threat to the heroes. And they're actually pretty menacing. They didn't just burst into the battlefield guns blazing. The episode shows how they can actually be very clever when working as a team. They take their time, strategize, and plan out coordinated attacks and provide distractions to throw off the heroes. What makes the terrible trio fun villains is that instead of coming across as a bumbling Team Rocket knockoff, they're actually competent, posing a legitimate threat. They even go the extra mile to really test that TVY rating. Chrysalis literally threatening to dismember Spike if they didn't surrender was intense. That's gotta be the most violent moment on the show, and certainly not something I'd expect from MLP. Something like this really details just how twisted and vicious she grew as a result of losing everything. Out of the 3 villains, she was definitely the most depraved. She was the only one who still stared down the heroes after getting depowered, the only one who vowed to keep returning, and the only one who kept lashing out at them as she was being petrified. She was certainly defiant to the end. gradually consumed by her own madness to the point that it was her downfall. And the best part, they actually don't get redeemed. Instead of being given some dramatic speech about how great friendship is or being offered a hand in forgiveness, they're held completely accountable for their actions. It's a good thing for the show to do this because it's important for people to learn that friendship isn't exactly an absolution for every problem. It shows that sometimes you just need to punish someone for doing terrible things and that some people are unwilling to change. Nothing they've done with their screen time as villains has warranted any goodwill. They were portrayed as indisputably villainous with no desire to redeem themselves. The reason why the terrible trio aren't worthy of redemption is because they're not in a position to be redeemed. They have a bucket list of severe crimes and threats, and they outright refused any hand in friendship they were offered. Having them stay as villains is actually much more interesting as it plays as a great foil to the main seven, showing how friendship, when placed in the wrong hands, can be a dangerous form of power. It displays how friendship is a neutral concept among characters, how there are also villains who have those that they befriend and are loyal to, but it can also act as a good metaphor for how misguided the concept of friendship is to certain villains. The thing that makes the main seven's friendship special is that it's made into something deeper and used as a force for good. In the case of the villains, they just viewed friendship as a form of teamwork. Something that actually helps their defeat feel poetic is that they each serve as the antithesis to what led to their downfall. Chrysalis wanted to absorb love to make herself stronger, but then became obsessed with revenge and hate, leaving herself powerless. Tyrek wanted magic for himself, but was overthrown by his inability to share his power with others. And Cozy Glow thought of friendship as a means to an end, but never considered its actual meaning and was punished for betraying her own kind. The very thing that motivated each of these villains is what ultimately resulted in their defeat. Redemption was simply not an option for them, and any sympathy they might have had is irrelevant in the face of their crimes. Not going the redemption route was honestly the best decision they could have made with this finale, since doing so would have just fed into a bad habit the show has had in recent seasons. Another nice thing about the episode is how it relegated Starlight to a supporting character and not have her take over the spotlight. Even as someone who's a fan of her character, I'll admit there have been times in the series where she was obviously treated as a creator's pet. Thankfully, that problem is avoided here, as the episode just has her defending the school and holding off Chrysalis. It shows how much of a quick thinker she can be in combat and further shows which advantages she has as a fighter. Even then, it doesn't give her more attention than is needed when it already had a lot of other things to focus on. She gets to be awesome for a few minutes without hogging screen time. It's nice to know the finale knew in the end that the core of the story was Twilight and the main seven, and didn't mandatorily shove Starlight in there as any sort of favoritism. And thank God she wasn't turned into an alicorn, because that would have been horrible. Unfortunately, this is where my praises stop because this episode has quite a number of problems. The pacing, for starters, is way too fast. It feels like this epic final battle for the fate of Equestria went by really quickly. After the reveal that Grogar was Discord in disguise, it mostly feels like the episode is just going through the motions to set up the last fight scene. With things like how quickly everyone forgot about Discord putting everyone in danger, or how insultingly quick the pillars were defeated, it feels like one of those episodes where they just want to get from point A to point B without putting enough investment in the parts in between. Too much time is spent focusing on the fact that Discord set this whole thing up and didn't even bother to think it through properly. And because of how quickly the final battle goes by, it ends up making the stakes feel hollow. And the tone itself feels really lacking in comparison to the fight between Twilight and Tyrek in Season 4. It was a rather short fight, but it was a battle taking place on a smaller scale, so it felt right for the way the episode set it up. And in spite of its smaller scale, it still managed to be really intense with the crimson colors in the background and the raw power that Twilight and Tyrek were showing off. This is supposed to be a huge endgame style war sequence involving all of the characters and alliances built throughout the series, and a lot of it ends up happening completely off screen. We really don't get to see any cool stuff going on in this final fight. They literally show characters like Big Mac, Autumn Blaze, and even the Buffaloes rushing at the villains, but we don't see them do anything. Why even have them there if we don't actually get to see them fight? You're not supposed to set up something this epic and then have it happen completely off screen like that. And for some reason, they repeat the whole elements were just symbols thing we already got in the season premiere. We should have gotten more worthwhile action sequences involving more characters instead of these snapshot cameos. Things like Smolder and Garble teaming up and combining their fire breath powers, or Starlight and Trixie performing firework magic together. Even if they just stuck to Grogar being Grogar and have him bring back Sombra to raise an army of dark creatures, it would have added more stakes to the battle. But instead, we end up getting a really generic run-of-the-mill final battle that feels like it would have been more suited for something back in Season 4 as opposed to the series finale. Now let's talk about the Pillars and the Royal Guards, who were nothing but cannon fodder in this episode. They're supposed to be really powerful and skilled warriors who prepare themselves specifically for these types of situations, and they're still taken out insultingly easily. I mean, really. Starswirl the Bearded has been built up as one of the most powerful characters in the show, He can perform magic spells powerful enough to banish people into other dimensions. He's literally implied to be alicorn level. Why is he attacking Tyrek with these generic, tiny-looking lasers? You seriously want to convince me that he can't use more powerful spells in this dire situation? And what about Rockhoof? This guy is powerful and fast enough to dig a giant trench around an erupting volcano, but he can't seem to break through a generic, common pile of rock. Where did his enormous strength go? You'd think he would have at least tried tackling Tyrek after his shovel was broken. Somnambula and Flash Magnus were immediately rendered useless as all they could do was fly at Tyrek, which would have literally done nothing. And what the hell is Meadowbrook even doing? Just throwing potions and smoke pellets? Unless they were poisonous, I really don't see how that was supposed to help. Miss Main is pretty much the only one I'm willing to justify here since she was old and her magic was always used for self-defense and never used for offense. But still, how the hell are any of these guys supposed to be legendary heroes of Equestria if they were defeated so quickly and easily? I'm not against Tyrek having this much power since it's a demonstration for Grogar's spell, but the pillar should have at least put up more of a fight. This is one of the reasons why the stakes ended up feeling so underwhelming, because everyone except Twilight and the main 7 are easily defeated regardless of their actual skill and power level. There should have been a huge fight between Tyrek and the Pillars during the final climactic showdown instead of this snapshot scene where he easily curb stomps them. As for the Royal Guards, them being useless is a joke that has long since stopped being funny. For them to be defeated so easily even after their intense new training, it feels like absolutely nothing about the guards have changed. Even the excuse that they were up against a Grogar spell-powered up alicorn doesn't work because their IQ is still presented as inexcusably low. Why did they think that simply tackling Cozy Glow's barrier was going to work when their lasers couldn't penetrate it? And what was charging supposed to do against an enemy that can fly? Did they just have nothing to fend off against magic users? Don't they have some kind of device to counter enemy magic by now? Just something to combat an actual threat? The guards in the finale don't put up any more of a fight than the guards who charged at Nightmare Moon only to be immediately blown away in the very first episode. How much of an embarrassment do you have to be to your country's military when Rarity, a unicorn who isn't even a combatant yet was able to hold off a fully powered chrysalis, a preteen dragon who just got his wings last season, and Fluttershy leading a group of featherless geese are putting up more of a fight than you? The Royal Guards are simply useless. Completely and utterly useless. They started the series as useless and they ended the series as useless. Nothing about them has improved in the slightest. They literally serve no purpose in the show if Twilight, Celestia, Luna, and the citizens are left defending themselves whenever a threat shows up. There was no excuse for the guards or the pillars to be this useless. You'd think they would have at least put up more of a fight, but the episode just treats them as inexcusably weak, and they ended up getting treated like table scraps who'd might as well not even be there. Then there's how badly the Student 6 were underutilized. They're honestly quite tragic figures in seasons 8 and 9. They're actually nice characters to be around who were given some proper development in a few episodes, which is why it's so annoying how badly they were lampshaded in spite of being implied to be the successors to the main characters. Their only contribution in the finale was rallying the other creatures together to stop the race war that was causing the Wendigos to come back. But this is something that could have easily been done with just about any other character from said race. Thorax, Gilda, Queen Novo, Prince Rutherford, Ember, Trixie. The way this moment in the episode is brought up isn't done in a way that makes the Student 6 special. And really, is this just supposed to be the end of their character arc? They just randomly show up to unite the land, which could have been done by any other group of characters? They don't join the fight or get help from the Tree of Harmony? Why is this the only thing they do throughout the finale? You'd think their connection with the Tree of Harmony would have played a role in the final battle since they were treating it as something important. But it doesn't even make an appearance. All the students do is take shelter in the basement of the school for a good chunk of the crisis, and then they suddenly show up at the end. I mean, come on. They didn't even fix the animation error where Ocellus was missing from the giant Deus Ex Machina laser. The Student 6 just come across as completely pointless in the finale, and in spite of being interesting characters, they end up looking like pointless additions to later seasons. Season 8, which was supposed to be about them, regulated them to background characters while putting more spotlight on the main 6, who at this point didn't need any more development. Outside of the two-parters, which still treated them as secondary, they were only given 3 episodes, and they were still forced to share one of those episodes with Rainbow Dash and Applejack, who were reduced to acting like blithering idiots. Even in season 9, they hardly get any sort of passing mention. The show gives them next to nothing to do while focusing on the main 6 some more, who they were already running out of things to do with. Literally the only member of the Student 6 who was given any chance to develop on her own was Smolder, and even then she had to play second fiddle to Spike. The other students are lashed to each other at all times and never get a chance to make an impression on their own, and Ocellus in particular got really screwed over. She's practically the least developed of the whole single group. They give her a backstory that heavily implies she could be Chrysalis's daughter, and they do absolutely nothing with it. No backstory on how she had to deal with life in the Hive under Chrysalis's reign or any sort of hardships. She's just kinda there. And all of this just makes the existence of the School of Friendship even more pointless. It was only ever used as a plot device for Season 8, and it's become completely irrelevant in Season 9 except for giving Starlight something to do when Twilight becomes ruler. With Twilight moving on to become ruler and the others focusing on their occupations after the coronation, the idea of them being teachers at a poorly thought out school has just become even more stupid in hindsight. Why did they put so much time into making them teachers if they immediately abandoned that occupation by the end of the show? I get that the existence of the school is basically Hasbro's fault since they wanted a friendship school as part of their toy line, but there's no reason why the staff couldn't come up with a better way to utilize it in the story. Honestly, there's a part of me that's glad that there's going to be a Season 10 with the comics, or that the IDW comics in general are still being made, because it's the only source I can think of that's giving the Student 6 more character development than the actual show. And because of all these things, the ending of the end just feels like a really average episode. Normally this isn't a bad thing, but you can't just be average when you're supposed to be part of the series finale to the show. It's supposed to be more memorable, more epic, more stand out compared to other season finales. It still has its good qualities, but they're not enough to outweigh its problems, and it just feels like any other two-parter in the show. Instead of a big epic showdown like we got in Avengers Endgame, we just get an average battle that isn't even 3 minutes long. And instead of everything coming together naturally, it ends up feeling rushed. For a two-parter that's meant to have more stakes and have a grander climax than anything else we've had so far, it pales in comparison to episodes like Twilight's Kingdom and A Canterlot Wedding. It even pales in comparison to the movie. It's honestly really annoying that this episode was so underwhelming when it clearly could have been so much more. Had this been the final episode and not the last problem, it would have been extremely disappointing considering it had so much wasted potential and bad writing decisions. And that's not including the supposedly shocking twist that Grogar was Discord the whole time. A writing decision so terrible that we'll have to talk about it next time.